be an advanced English speaker, you can't only use basic grammar. And to pass an advanced English exam like the C1 Advanced, you can't only use the past, the present, and the future. You have to use more complex structures. To use advanced grammar, the only thing you need to do today is to take that first step and do something. And in this video, I'm going to make it really easy for you. For those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm Izzy from English with Izzy, your B2 First, C1 Advanced, and Advanced English teacher. And today we're going to be looking at inversions, but more specifically, emphasizing with inversions, because there are various types of inversions you can learn, and we're not going to do them all today. And if you stay to the end, I'm going to give you guys a PDF full of all the grammar that I'm going to teach today with some extra goodies as well, so stay with us. Anyway, let's jump right in. Now, inversions might seem terrifying to you, but I'm going to show you that they are in fact much easier than you probably think they are. And the reason why is because you probably already know how to invert, right? When we invert a sentence, we change the order of particular words. So if you know how to form a basic question, like the one we can see here in the presentation, let's take a basic sentence, right? I like to eat chocolate lava cake. For those who know me, you'll know I'm obsessed with chocolate, and chocolate lava cake is by far my favorite dessert. Now, as you can see here in our original sentence, we have a subject and then a verb, right? I like. And when we ask a question in English, you guys already know that we have to put a verb at the beginning, right? Like an auxiliary verb or a modal verb, like do, will, can. And that's an inversion. So if we look at the question below, do you like to eat chocolate lava cake? But then in the second sentence, the subject doesn't come first, a verb comes first, right? Do you, do I? So we've changed the order of a verb and the subject. And when we're forming any inverted sentence, the structure is going to be exactly the same as this basic question. So we'll always start with an auxiliary verb like do, does, did, have, has, had, or a modal verb like can, could, will, would, plus the subject, plus the verb. And that's it, okay? So now let's go specifically onto emphasizing with inversions. We're going to focus specifically on negative adverbs and adverbial phrases. And the most important thing we need to know about why we use inversions with these negative words is because we want to emphasize their meaning. So although the actual meaning doesn't change, the strength of the sentence does. So, and this is really important when we get to more advanced levels of English, right? We need to learn different, more advanced, more complex ways of expressing ourselves. So although it's not necessary to know this grammar to be a good English student, obviously the more complex structures you know, the more impressive your level of English will be, and the more you will be able to understand as well. So in the topic of emphasizing with inversions, we have a very specific formula that we need to use, okay? As you can see here, we have a selection of negative or restrictive words. Most of them are adverbs, right? Like never, rarely, hardly ever, seldom, which means exactly the same as rarely, but it's just a bit more fancy-pantsy. No sooner, under no circumstances. So in certain ways, they express something negative or something restrictive. Now, we can put these phrases later on in the sentence, as I said before, but by putting them at the very beginning, then we are emphasizing their meaning. So you can say, I have never been to the beach, but if you say, never have I been to the beach, we're emphasizing the negative. So when we put these words at the beginning of the sentence, we must use an inversion. So grammatically, we have to use an inversion because if they are at the beginning, it's grammatically incorrect to not use an inversion. So you cannot say, never, I do go to the beach. It doesn't sound right. So remember this formula, or just wait to the end because I'm going to give you all of the PDFs anyway. And this is all you really need to do to be able to formulate an advanced inversion. So we're going to put a restrictive word or a negative adverbial at the beginning. This is just fancy terminology for all of the words you can see below. Then we're going to have the auxiliary or modal verb, just like we do in a question, right? Do, does, have. And then we're going to put the subject. For example, never do I, rarely can she do something successfully. That was a bit of a negative example, but I'm going to give you lots of examples now with all of the negative adverb phrases that we have below. So let's keep going. Let's start with these common negative adverbs, never and rarely. Now, as I said before, seldom means exactly the same as rarely. It's just much more formal and quite academic. So let's take a normal sentence. I never wake up before 7 a.m. The sentence is perfectly correct, but if we're writing a proposal or a report, for example, and we want to show off that advanced grammar, we might think, okay, this is the perfect opportunity to use a C1 inversion. So we're going to start by putting the negative adverb at the very beginning, never. Now, what do we need next? We need an auxiliary verb or a modal verb. Now, just like when we ask a question in the present tense, we have to put the auxiliary verb do or does, right? And if you're still finding it difficult, try to think of how you would ask this as a question. I never wake up before 7 a.m. Do I wake up before 7 a.m.? So we need the present auxiliary verb do, and then the subject, and then the rest of the sentence stays the same. So never do I wake up before 7 a.m. Never does she call me because we're not friends anymore. Never will I be able to make a chocolate lava cake, so I'll have to keep buying it from the supermarket all the time. Let's go on to the next one. We have another example here with rarely, and the formula is exactly the same, so we're just going to be practicing with different vocabulary. I can say, I rarely have a shower at the gym. Don't judge me, I'm not a smelly person, I just don't like taking showers at the gym. I prefer to take a shower at home. So what I can do is I can start my sentence with my restrictive adverb, right, rarely, but I can't say rarely I do. I need to change the order. Rarely do I. And I have to put an auxiliary verb there or a modal verb. And because there isn't already an auxiliary or a modal verb in my sentence, we have to put one in. So again, if it's a bit tricky, think, how would I ask this as a question? Do I have a shower at the gym? Rarely do I. Oh, I see I've made a mistake here. Wake, have. I don't know why I would wake up at the gym, so let's just eliminate the word wake. Rarely do I have a shower at the gym. The formula stays the same. Rarely do I. Let's have a look at another one. Now, as I mentioned before, seldom means exactly the same as rarely. So I could say she seldom speaks over others. The phrasal verb to speak over means to speak at the same time as somebody else, kind of like to interrupt them. So I'm not going to say do because we're talking about her in the third person. So I'm going to say does. And the inversion is seldom does she speak over others. Now, as you can see here, the conjugation of the verb speak is different in the original and in the second sentence, right? Because in the first one, we have a present tense. She seldom speaks. But in the second sentence, we have to follow the grammar rules of an auxiliary verb, right? Just like if we ask a question, we wouldn't say does she speaks because does is already conjugated. So after every auxiliary verb and modal verb, we are not going to conjugate the next verb. It's always going to be in the infinitive. So even if in the original sentence, the verb is conjugated differently, remember that always in English, after do, does, did, will, would, can, could, should, all of these modal and auxiliaries, the verb is not going to be conjugated. It's going to be in the bare infinitive. So the infinitive with no to. Now, these phrases are getting a little bit more complex, but the structure of our inverted sentence is always going to be the same. So let's have a look at this original sentence with no inversion. You shouldn't touch the dog under any circumstances. It's already quite a negative sentence, right? And to make it even stronger, to make it even more emphasized, we're going to put this restrictive phrase at the very beginning. under no circumstances. It has to be negative, so instead of the any, we're going to say no. You might be thinking, how do I know how to change these phrases? You don't have to worry about changing phrases from the non-inverted to the inverted version. Just remember particular phrases like rarely, never, seldom, under no circumstances. Learn the phrases that go at the beginning and the rest will be a little bit easier. So, under no circumstances is a restrictive adverb. Then we need a modal verb. And we have a modal verb in the original sentence, so we don't have to think, how would I ask this as a question? Let me put in an auxiliary verb. We already have one here. Under no circumstances should you. Should is not in the negative because we can't have two negatives in a sentence in English. And because the first word or phrase is always going to be negative, for example, under no circumstances, then our modal verb has to be affirmative. Under no circumstances should you touch the dog is the same as saying you shouldn't touch the dog under any circumstances. Both sentences only have one negative, right? And in the inversion, the negative always goes at the beginning. Now, the next negative phrase we have is at no time, which is almost the same as saying never or at no moment, right? So I can say, I didn't think of eating her chocolate lava cake at any time, at no moment, which is not true because if there's a chocolate lava cake, I'm going to eat it or at least think about eating it if I'm not allowed to eat it. So we're going to use the same formula. At no time did I think of eating her chocolate lava cake. We have to put the first phrase in the negative, at no time. We already have an auxiliary verb in the original sentence, right? I didn't. So we're going to use the same auxiliary verb. We just have to put it in the affirmative because we can't have two negatives in one sentence in English. Now, we have two phrases here which we use to talk about two different activities, normally one which interrupts another. The inversion is also going to stay right at the beginning of the sentence. So I can say, I had hardly started eating my chocolate lava cake when the doorbell rang. So I was doing, or I had just started doing one activity when a second thing interrupted my first activity. No sooner and then means exactly the same. What can confuse people is the fact that we use the word than instead of when, but it's just one of those grammar rules that you have to learn. Hardly had I done this when, no sooner had I done this than this happened. So it's a bit confusing, but we just have to learn it as it is. So I could say, hardly had I, and by putting the negative at the beginning, I'm emphasizing the hardly, right? That I just started doing it when the other thing happened. So hardly had I started eating my chocolate lava cake when the doorbell rang. Or no sooner had I started eating my chocolate lava cake than the doorbell rang. One thing just starts and then another one interrupts the first one. In the slide before, I already gave you this example, but I didn't change it because again, these two are synonyms. I had no sooner started eating my chocolate lava cake than the doorbell rang. Now, even for me, this sentence without the inversion sounds quite unnatural. It sounds far too academic or literary, and it's not nearly as common as hardly when, but again, if you're learning English or trying to learn some advanced grammar for the purpose of advanced English exams, then this could definitely prove useful. All right, we're nearing the end. I know it can be a bit tiring to learn C1 grammar, but you're doing really well. We've only got a couple more to do, so let's power through them. Now, we use this negative phrase here not only, but also when we want to talk about two things and emphasize them, right? So I can say in a normal sentence, she not only ate my chocolate lava cake, but she also used up my coffee. But if I want to really emphasize the two bad things she did, I'm going to put not only at the very beginning, because in the end, we're learning the topic of emphasis with inversion, right? So I can say, not only did she, I put a past tense auxiliary verb because my original sentence is in the past tense, right? She ate. Again, if we're stuck, we can think, how would I ask a question if this is my answer? She ate. Did she eat? I have my auxiliary verb did. So we're going to use the same formula as always. The negative phrase, not only, the auxiliary verb did, and then the subject, she. You'll also see that my verb is in a different tense, right? In the original sentence, it's in the past. She ate. But because we have an auxiliary verb did, we are not going to conjugate the main verb, and we're going to keep it in the infinitive, just like we always do. Now, this particular word here, only, when we use a time expression, is kind of the exception to the rule, because although we are going to do an inversion, the inversion is not at the very beginning of the sentence like it was in all the examples that we saw before. And the reason for that is because we need to put the moment that the thing happened, or the time expression, before the inversion. So I can say in a normal sentence, you may only go out after giving me some chocolate lava cake. And the moment I'm talking about is in the future, right? After you give me the chocolate lava cake, then you can go out. So I'm talking about a particular moment in time. So in the inverted sentence, we're going to start our sentence with only, which is our negative or our restrictive adverbial. And then I'm going to put my time expression. Only after giving me some chocolate cake may you go out. Only when I have finished cleaning the house will I prepare lunch. Only when I am 50 years old will I finally have time to relax. So the idea is the same, but so that it makes sense, we have to put our time phrase before our inversion. But if you imagine the period of time as the negative, then it's not too different. Now, the very last restrictive adverb that we're going to do today is little. And this is the only one that really doesn't make sense because it doesn't have a version without an inversion. We don't say she little knows, but we use this commonly as an inversion and as an inversion only. So ignore your understanding of the word little. It has nothing to do with something being small in size. But in this context here, if we say little does she know, it's another way of saying she has no idea. We don't use this with a huge range of verbs, but it's normally to do with people understanding, people realizing, or people knowing something. So I've left a little list here at the bottom of some common verbs that go really well with little, but the formula stays the same, right? Little does she know, meaning she has no idea, I borrowed her book. Little did she realize that I put the presents under the tree. She didn't realize. So it's another way of saying that person didn't see what happened, that person didn't realize. Little did I understand the meaning of that complex book I read at university. I had no idea what it was trying to say. Instead of saying she doesn't suspect a thing, you could say little does she suspect a thing. It's in fact easier to learn particular phrases like little does she know, little does she realize, because there's no conversion that really happens here. Now, I know that was a lot of grammar at once, but you made it to the very end, so well done. Not everyone will make the effort to sit through grammar videos, especially advanced grammar videos, so clearly you're a special one. Remember that on my website as well, you have lots more resources when it comes to advanced English, such as phrase lists, free courses, and so on. And they're particularly useful for those of you who are planning to take a Cambridge English exam. Now, if you want to get your hand on the PDF, which has all of the presentation slides that you saw today, as well as lots of examples, then I'll leave the link in the description below. Here is the big button so you can subscribe to this channel. Here, you'll see even more resources so you can learn for free with me. You've got free courses, you've got speaking vocabulary lists, and even more. And here I'm going to leave a playlist of even more advanced videos if you're on a roll and want to keep watching some YouTube videos now. Last but not least, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe, even leave a comment if you want to challenge yourself and write a sentence using emphasis with inversion. I'll have a look at it, correct it if there are any mistakes, and we can have a chat in the comments below. Anyway, that's it for today, guys. So don't forget, stay curious, stay learning.